wake up? Guess we'll do roll call first. In the room is Brent, Julie, Kyle, myself, and a guest, Mr. Landry. And I'll just go down the roster so I don't miss anybody who's online. Dan.
Hey, good morning.
Gary Godey.
Good morning.
Morning. Gary Van Dam. Matt Vickery. Dave Thompson.
Yes, I'm here.
Stan. I see you.
Is that Stan?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning.
Morning. Eric Robinson. James.
Hi, Dennis. This is James. I'm here.
Morning. Tim.
Good morning. I'm here.
John Ukestead.
Yes, I'm here.
Bruce Nelson.
Yeah, here.
Richard Wood. Ron Hawkins. Richard Morris. Joel from the state. All right. Got plenty of people to have a meeting. Does anybody have any comments on the draft minutes, it's pretty much just the board's report from last month? Is there a motion on it?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Dan Clifford. I'll second.
Dennis, Gary Van Dam's here.
Morning, Gary.
Morning, guys.
All right, unless there's an objection, I'll consider the minutes unanimously approved. Once, twice. All right, we're done with that one. Next thing on the finances, are there any comments or questions on the financial report? Right. Any comments or questions on the bills, page 23? All right, we can move on to talking about the administrator. They don't have anything in the packet, at least the draft packet. But just a quick refresher, we had two firms submit statements of qualifications, and then the board asked them to come back with proposals, and both did. So that's Provost and Pritchard, and then RGS. So I know that there's other conversations about the AVEC potentially doing this, but I think we need to focus our comments on those two, and then we can add in comments about AVEC, but they're not officially on the board yet. So how do you want to do this? You want me to just go down the roster, get everybody's input, or just have an open discussion?
Your preference, Dennis.
Okay. I'll just go down the roster and get everybody's thoughts. Start with Julie.
Okay, after reviewing their proposals and listening to their interviews, regarding Provost and Pritchard. They are too costly. I feel their proposal is going to be more of what we have had in the past. It's an approximation. There are too many loopholes that discuss that they would be doing or wanting to do some out of scope work. There's no question in my mind that that's going to happen. I was concerned when, well, there's quite a few concerns I have there, but when there was going to be additional charges for familiarizing yourself with the basin, that's going to be an additional charge. Outreach to landowners, building relationships, none of that is in the scope of work. That's an alarming statement to me. In regards to, yes, and another thing in their proposal, that they talk quite a bit about grants and looking for grant money to accomplish some of the Watermaster goals, and I don't understand that at all. And one of their examples there was to drill monitoring wells and purchase and install meters. Well, that's not the job of the Watermaster in my mind whatsoever. To me, that looks like not just doing what the judgment says the administrator is to do or what the Watermaster board directs them to do. That is growing this into a large organization. And I don't think that's what we're here for. And I know we can't afford it. On RGS, they're costly. Handling things remotely is not something that I would prefer, and many don't prefer. And remember, when I make these comments, this does not just come from Galen and I. I have 7 or 8 regular landowners and Exhibit 4 parties that call us, and they want to be heard. So they call us, they think that's the right, process to do this in, which, and they're right. With RGS, being remote is a problem, and not being remote, then you're going to have additional costs, which they said if they had to have somebody here or facilities or a person, whatever, that's just another cost. I can say in their interview, when Derek Urosic asked what was the most pressing item facing the Watermaster board, they did have the right answer, staying within the budget. And I was surprised with Provost and Pritchard because their answer was they were used to staying in budgets and there wasn't a lot of money in the San Joaquin. Well, there's a lot of money in the San Joaquin. We're not in the same ballpark there, but I just, in my mind, I cannot support either candidate, either applicant.
Okay. Dan?
Thank you, Dennis. I did the same thing as Julie. I dug into the proposals and was present for the presentation, physically present. My thoughts are I considered both of them. I looked at them with, I think, I want to give them both a fair shake. I think that's important. And without going too much into the details, I agree with Julie that they are expensive when you compare them against what AVEC has been doing. And I think all of us, including myself, have been, I don't know what the right word I would use. I guess maybe we have been spoiled because AVEC is doing this work for so much cheaper, although I don't think, and I continue to believe this, and I've said it in the past, I don't think the work that AVEC is doing represents a true full charge for the work. The AVEC team has done an excellent job. There's no doubt about it. but I've been beating this drum in the past. I'll do it here. I do think that we need to have a disinterested third party doing this work. I say that with the utmost respect for the folks at AVAC, but I do think that we need a separation of power. So that means I'm looking at the two that we've been tasked to evaluate. So at the end of the day, I think some of the concerns that Julie is calling out as it relates to Provost and Pritchard can be controlled when we're setting the contract. And I think that certain things can be removed from the scope of work or further refined in the agreement. To comment on some of Provost and Pritchard's observations with respect to observation wells and things of that nature. If they've got grants to do that, that's not necessarily a cost to us. There would be an administrative component to it. I'm not really in love with that, and I'm just trying to address Julie's point on that. But I think when you look at both applications, both proposals, I'm in favor of Provost and Pritchard as opposed to RGS. And I think that they're both very capable, but at the end of the day, I think the scale tips in favor of Provost in my mind. So that's all I've got to say, Dennis.
All right, thank you, Dan. Gary Godey?
Yeah, I was at the interview process. First, I agree with Julie. If she has landowners that are concerned, I will echo her sentiment. If I have to pick from the interview process, I was more inclined to go with RGS. I thought that they had better answers, and I think Provost and Pritchard tended to be more political. They didn't really address a lot of the issues. I felt they seemed to be more personality oriented. I just didn't come away with a good feel from their interview. I think RGS had a better interview. But at the end of the day, I've always felt if we can get AVEC to stay on somehow, that's my opinion. I agree. It echoes Julie's sentiments as far as trying to keep the costs down. I don't see that happening.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Gary Van Dam.
Yeah, I agree with Julie, Kyle, on this. And first of all, Provost and Pritchard, I believe they have a conflict in the valley. I know there's a party that's already involved with them, and they're also part of the Watermaster, or party in the Watermaster. They hold a production right. To RGS, I think both firms are too high. I don't think we can afford them. And both of them are from out of the area, so they're going to have to travel into the valley. And so travel time's also an issue for them. I agree with keeping it local and keeping AVAC, and probably, I think AVAC's about half the money that these other two firms are. So our assessments we don't have to raise our assessments to the production holders. And I believe AVAC would be willing to, I can't speak for them, but to hire an outside person to do some of the workload for the Watermaster.
I think that's the problem, Gary. We haven't gotten any action from the AVAC board that kind of puts them in official consideration. Until that happens, we do have to make a recommendation between the other two. But we can make the comments known.
Well, yeah, but hold it, Dennis. We don't have to really choose. What we have to do is, like Matt said, we wanted to play out, let these two work their way through. We can obviously see that that's probably not going to work. And after that, then AVAC would get involved. And so they haven't yet because they wanted to let this play out. But with that being said, it looks like it's played out and we can't afford them. and now AVAC can talk and decide what way they want to go with the Watermaster, and of course with all your guys' approval to that.
Understood. Anything else, Gary?
That's it. Thank you.
All right. David Thompson?
So I wasn't involved in the interview process, so I don't have anything to add on that front. So, but interesting comments everybody's made so far, for sure.
All right, any comments on the written proposals from both groups?
No, I do agree that we need to go through the process with these two and make a recommendation before considering other avenues. So I don't have any experience with any of either of the folks and that submitted proposals. So yeah, I would defer to the group on that.
All right. Stan?
Yeah, I guess my view is just, I think both are qualified. I did not come away with a strong preference for either candidate. I think either candidate could do the job. I tended to agree with a lot of what Dan had to say. I agree that I think AVEC has done a great job. Frankly, I think we would have been in trouble without AVEC stepping forward and providing some leadership. But AVEC is not in this process now. And I can certainly hear a lot of people feeling a lot of support towards AVEC taking or continuing on in the role. But I think it's notable that they are not in this process. At least I can say for myself, I don't know what their position is going to be once this process does play out. And so I agree with the idea that we really need to look at these two candidates. I hear the concern about costs, but I think we saw very similar costs between these two candidates. And I'm not sure these costs were actually vastly different from what we saw with Hallmark. And that says to me, this is probably what the market rate is for the services we want. So that's my view. I'm not really picking between the two, but I think we should be picking between them. So that's what I have, Dennis.
All right, thank you, Stan. Brent?
Yeah, the interview process, I was a little disappointed in. Initially, I was leaning towards P&P. Thought that they were a little disorganized. I thought that Jeff dug in a little deeper into the nuts and bolts of the actual valley. I think that RGS seemed to be more like, hey, not a problem. This is what we do. We can administer it from an administrative standpoint. I don't know, and I am dealing with RGS right now on a separate project. It is all web-based, online, virtual meetings. Seems to work. I think from an administrative standpoint, it really depends what the board's seeking. Do they want an administrator? Do they want an administrator that's more hands-on involved? I think P&P might be that answer. If they're just looking for an administrator for the accounting purposes, I think RGS can easily handle that aspect as well. I'm still, from the last meeting, a little concerned and confused onto what we're disqualifying these two companies for. If it's the price, then let's just say it's the price. If it's a conflict of interest, that essentially eliminates AVEC as well, because they probably have more conflict of interest than anybody. So I don't think that conflict of interest, if it's the price, then let's just call it the price. And I could support that. But I guess right now, if I had to choose between these two after the interview process, I'm leaning a little bit towards RGS at this point. Again, not thoroughly impressed with either of the interviews, but overall, I guess that's where my needle's tipping.
All right, thank you. James?
All right, Dennis, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't really want to be in this position at all, to tell you the truth. But I agree with a lot of what everybody said. So I don't know if there's much more I can add. So if AVAC, not hearing from them, is completely not going to be part of it, and the board is going to make a decision, I'd like to have some influence on that with a vote. I felt like RGS may have had more accounting, but we don't know because we don't know what she's going to do until she has the work in front of her. That to me is concerning. And then Robinson Pritchard, I think they're more than capable of doing it as well, but I don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're being told what to do instead of someone helping us do what we need to get done. So I'll go with whatever the board decides. I would love AVAC to do it, but I had one other thing I wrote down here as a note. I believe that we're looking at a 2-year contract. I think that's something we should not put ourselves in that position. I think it should remain a 1 year. So whoever is decided, at about the 6-month mark, I think there should be a review. And then at the 9-month mark, we decide we're just going to keep them or not. And then there we can move on. But I think being locked in for 2 years is kind of a dangerous situation, not knowing. And then the other thing is we used to have a general manager for the Watermaster that actually kept tasks moving in a direction so they don't go off. Maybe we could reappoint a general manager to actually be in charge of the consultants to make sure they stay within tasks and within range of the funds. So I guess with that being said, I guess AVAC would always be my first pick. And then I'd put RGS if we had to, and Robinson Pritchard if we end up with them. So I think they're all capable candidates. It's unfortunate we don't know until we know. So that's kind of the scary thing that we're all kind of venturing into. So again, those are my AVAC would be 1, RGS would be 2, and Provis would be 3 for me.
All right, thank you, James.
Can you repeat that? What you said, or can you repeat that last part?
As I understand what James just said, he recommend AVAC first, RGS second, Provost and Pritchard third.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know we got 3 choices on this round.
Well,
Okay, now let me get back in.
Let's
I thought we were talking.
Can I say something?
we'll collect the discussion. Go ahead.
If you don't mind, this is Brandon Clancy. Normally I don't speak at these, but I am looking for clarity through this process from the sounds of what you guys are talking about today, and I will not render an opinion or speak on this one way or another, but it appears that you guys are talking about 3 choices, and it's a no vote on both of these contracts, a yes vote for RGS or a yes vote for Provost and Pritchard. And it would be nice when we go into the board meeting to kind of have some clarity on what you guys are chasing at the board level.
We'll get there.
That's all I have to say.
We'll get there. Ken.
I don't think I have anything more to add to the group for consideration. I think everybody agrees that from a cost perspective, what James just described is the most desirable. The only thing I want to reiterate is what Dennis you tried to reel us all back into. What is the advice that we are rendering, and that is between the 2 candidates. And with that said, I'll just leave my comment to the one thing that I think that we lack from our consultants is somebody that can vet the our groundwater any type of groundwater rendering. In other words, when we look at material injury analyses and things like that, we don't have anybody to really vet that. And between the two consultants, I think Provo would be the more appropriate choice. That's the only thing that I think I would contribute to this group.
All right, and just for clarification, that is somebody that would, like a peer review of what Todd's recommendation says.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. John Ukestead,
Yeah, Dennis, how are you doing?
I'm here.
Good. Glad to hear it. Yeah, I'm very happy with the job that Peter and Angel have been doing. There's no way in good conscience. Now, I sat in those interviews, all of them. The 2 times that these candidates were interviewed, I can't support them. I can support AVAC if they choose to continue their work for the next couple of years. I am tired of going through this process of spinning our wheels. There's Stan, Dan, and a number of people that are on the call right now are very happy with the job that AVAC has been doing. I cannot in any way at good conscience support either one of these candidates. I can support AVAC, and I will support AVAC if they choose to remain administrator for the next couple of years. And I think I can I have the support of all the mutuals, which is the 15 mutuals that are in the mutual group. I will support that also. That's all I've got to say. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, John. Bruce, anything to add to that?
More of the same for John. I agree with him totally. I think AVAC is the best choice if they choose to extend in there. So I don't like the other 2. They're going to charge more and be the same as Hallmark. So that's all you're going to get. So I would stay with AVAC if they're willing to do that. That's it.
All right, we'll go back and pick up any other alternates that are here. Matt Vickery. Eric Robinson. John Houghton. And then me. I missed the one meeting. I did get to hear them speak at the last meeting. I think I saw little indications that we might end up with a Hallmark-ish type reign with Provost. So I was kind of leaning to them before that interview process, and if choosing between the 2 right now, I would probably lean more towards RGS. They seem to be simply interested in managing the process rather than running it. But those are my 2 cents. So now we've all had our 2 or 3 or 4 cents in here. Is there a motion for some kind of action? I think Brandon kind of summarized it. What's before the board are these 2 proposals. So a motion in favor of either one or none.
I have a quick question. Just thinking out loud. So it appears like it's probably not a chance, but what if next month AVAC says, thank you, we appreciate the consideration, but we're not interested, period? we're right back to square one.
Right, and there'll be
I
required.
mean, I just feel like we've been doing this for 2 years now. And then if we don't have a plan B, I'm just concerned or is that not really reality neither?
So
So,
that's the unknown part here.
right.
You know, as far as my views on AVEC, I think, you know, they do a great job, even without Palmdale Water District. But at some point, being a party and being the administrator might become at least a perception problem of people, but that'd be my only concern. So is there a motion?
Dennis, Scary Goaty, can I speak real quick?
Sure.
After hearing James's comments, I kind of, with all the reluctance being put forward today, I kind of agree that maybe we just back it to 1 year and see what they come back and say if they're acceptable. That might eliminate one or both in this process, but I wouldn't go 2 years if there's such, reluctance at this point.
All right, well, maybe that could be part of a motion.
Dennis, can I take a stab at a motion
Sure.
and playing off what James said as well? I feel like we've got a 3-part vote here. I'd make a motion to have a no vote for RGS and Provost and Pritchard. And then a separate single vote if you vote for RGS or if you vote for Provost and Pritchard, to split it. Or it's a straight no all the way across the board.
Well, it's your motion, make it what you want.
Well, that's it. Either a straight no on both of them, or if folks on the board prefer one or the other, then vote yes on them.
I'll second that motion on Julie Cow. John, you can sit.
All right, just for clarity, this would be a motion to reject both proposals. And a second motion to go with RGS if forced. Or if,
I'm a straight no on both.
okay. Well, let's start there.
May I make an administrative idea?
Sure.
Perhaps there's a roll call vote and they call it out, no, RGS or Provost and Pritchard as you go down the list. And that would give clarity on what the will of your board is, as well as giving the Watermaster board some insight on what the will of the advisory committee is.
All right, well, that would be that wouldn't be what this motion does. So this is a straight up or down no on both.
I think that it has to be in my mind.
Well, let's start there and go through.
Dennis, this is Dan. Before you start voting, I want to try to understand the impact. Just taking these one by one, Julie has couched it in terms of it's a straight no as to both. So if you vote yes to that, then you're saying that you are rejecting both of them. If you vote no to that, you are accepting one or the other. Am I viewing this incorrectly?
Yeah, I think that's the intent. So if this were to fail, then we would have to have a follow-up motion as to which of the two we would recommend.
And this is Scary Goaty again. this just goes to the Watermaster board. We have Calandry here listening in. What can't he just bring the sentiment to the board without us doing all this motion? I mean,
no, we'll have to put this, I'll have to figure out how to put this down on paper. And so that all the directors can read what our position is. Rather than filter it all through Brandon. Not that there'd be anything wrong with that, but they want to hear it straight from us.
But Gary, one thing that is interesting about the comment that you made, I mean, at the Watermaster board level, when it comes to looking at the minutes from the advisory, Brandon could expand his thoughts on what took place.
Brandon chose to sit in on this. He's acting as a liaison to the Watermaster board. I don't see why at this point he's already interacted. So I don't.
His view on our meeting, right? I'm just saying we also have to do it in writing.
Yeah, it has to be formal. You can do both.
Right.
So the double no vote basically means that we did just perform all of these functions for the let it play out value for the entertainment purposes. And now that's the double no vote. We have no backup beyond that. That's my only concern, is not having a plan B.
Well, my backup on
Without having we really haven't had a plan A yet. I mean, this is supposed to be plan A.
Right.
And so we're going to squash plan A without a plan B.
Well, let's see. I mean, we don't know
Sure.
how the vote is yet.
Sure.
So again, the motion is to reject both proposals. So a yes vote would reject both proposals. A no vote would say that you want one of these. And then if the no prevails, we'll come back and entertain motions on that. All right.
Well, Dennis, what about if we reject both proposals with a 2-year commitment, but we bring it back we don't reject it if it's 1-year commitment? We can get into the weeds on this also.
Going back to the person that made the motion.
It's motioned and seconded.
Yeah, I just think that that particular motion handcuffs us pretty tight.
This is Dan. I would agree with Brent on this. Dennis, can I speak for just a brief moment?
Sure.
Okay. If AVEC was somebody that we wanted to date and they kept saying no, and we kept pushing the issue, we'd be arrested for stalking. AVEC is not part of the mix right now. And I know everybody kind of wishes that AVEC still was. I'm not going to support that. And because that's not the issue that we've been asked to address. So we're really veering off the trail now. I think that in order for this meeting to be effective and provide some guidance to the board, we need to give the board the benefit of our thoughts on this. And whether or not it's RGS and you have to hold your nose, or if it's Provost and Pritchard and you have to hold your nose on that, I honestly, I don't have a strong preference for either. But they haven't asked us to vote on whether or not AVEC will do this. So I think we need to remember our charge for providing guidance to the board. And what I would suggest, Julie, we can have your vote. I'm fine with that. But, you know, in comments back to the board, Dennis, I might suggest you just say that a number of the board members are continuing to pine for AVEC. But
Right.
I do think we should vote on that. I think we should provide the guidance, because honestly, right now, I just don't think we're giving the board any guidance.
Dennis, John Yucas, who made those last comments?
John, this is Dan Cliff.
Okay, Dan. Okay. Well, if I'm not mistaken, Julie made a motion. Then a motion was seconded. So put it
Yeah.
up for a vote. Why are we going through all this shit?
Well,
Okay.
I have a suggestion. We'll go do the roll call vote on Julie's motion. And then maybe we'll just do a straight up yes or no on each of the proposals. And we can give the board all that information. Sound good? I think it's important that we get the committee's viewpoints on all those three issues. So with the motion that's before us is to reject both. So a yes is no to both proposals that have been turned in. A no would be that you like one of them. And then we'll come back and we'll vote on both of those and see what the committee's views are, and we'll just turn those views into the board. So, that being said, Julie,
Yes.
Dan,
No, and just to respond to Yukasted's comment, I would agree with you that a lot of this is garbage, and if we just did what we were supposed to do, these meetings wouldn't last nearly as long.
all right, Gary Godey,
Well, I got plenty of time, but I vote yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
David Thompson,
No.
Stan,
No.
Brent,
I'm just not really in favor of how the motion handcuffs the situation. Abstaining doesn't even do anything because it's either you're voting against all of it or not. So I'll vote no.
James,
I'll vote yes.
Kim,
No.
John,
Yukastad?
yes,
Yes.
and Bruce.
Yes.
All right, if I had counted that right, I have 6 yes, 5 no. So now if we do alphabetically, Provost and Pritchard, if you had to choose between, if the only choice ended up being between Provost and RGS, so we'll do the Provost votes first. Julie,
No.
Dan Clifford,
Yes,
Gary Godey,
Dennis, I'm a little slow. Can you restate that for me?
So what we're doing now is we're gonna go back through and do independent votes for Provost and Pritchard, and then RGS. So if it ends up being that they're the only two, which one would you prefer? And we're starting with Provost, yes or no?
No.
Okay. Gary Van Dam,
No.
David,
No.
Stan,
You know, I don't have a preference. Do I vote yes for both of them?
that's up to you.
I'm gonna vote yes then.
All right? Brent,
No.
James,
No.
Kim,
No.
John Ukestead,
No.
and Bruce.
No.
All right. Now with RGS, we'll go through it again. Julie,
No.
Dan,
Yes.
Gary Godey,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
No.
David,
Yes.
Stan,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
James,
No.
Kim,
Yes.
John Ukestead,
No.
and Bruce.
No.
All right, I'll pass this on to the board and just for Provost and Pritchard, had 2 yeses, 9 nos. For RGS, 6 yeses, 5 nos. So I'll just report that along with the comments in our report to the board, along with the split or the 6 to 5 vote on neither of them.
Dennis, can we vote for AVAC now?
AVEC isn't an option yet.
We already did them. We did that on the first go around on the motion.
I'm sorry.
So until AVEC makes itself an option, there's nothing to vote on for AVEC. I'll let the comments be known. That, some of the committee is interested in them continuing. But that's all we can do at this point. Well, thank you, everybody. That burned up an hour almost. So, but it's a good discussion because it's important for how we're going to handle business for the next year or two.
Thank you guys for letting me attend.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for working through that, Dennis.
I tried. We'll see if I did. All right. Next item up is the audit services. This seems pretty straightforward. To continue with the same firm for this year's audit, or for the audit that'll cover 2024. Are there any thoughts on that?
Can I ask this question? So their quote was 58% higher than what they charged for the 23 audit. Is that due strictly to a possible transition in administrator?
Yeah, I don't think we can answer that.
Julie, this is Stan. I think somewhere in that packet, I think it says the cost may be higher because they were offered a 1-year contract rather than a several-year contract. And so that we did not get a preferred rate because it was only for 1 year, is my recollection.
For that discount that they referred to.
Yes.
Yeah, typically with auditors, if you give them a multi-year contract, you get a better price because they're get more familiar, it takes less work. And this one, there's a little bit of a risk because whoever the administrator is will go out and do a full RFP next year. Any other comments on this?
Well, I guess I'd have to ask if we were to do a 2-year contract, and I know everybody talked about one, but that's an incredible increase for just a 1-year contract. I think for the work that they've been doing, they know what's expected of them. It's a pretty alarming increase.
I can tell you from experience working with several different auditing firms, that's less than what they charge. That's definitely less than what they charge us. But again, I think the accounting side of the Watermaster is not that complex. So
That's what I would say. I wouldn't think it would touch what you have to do here.
no, but it is considerably lower than what we pay on an annual basis. And typically auditing firms want 3 to 5 year contracts, from what I've seen. So maybe that is why it's a little steeper.
Okay.
But I do know that we had a good audit recently, so that was nice.
Yes,
That's what the Watermaster board.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
nice clean audit for a change.
I do think that it's nice for administrative staff, from a staffing standpoint, working with building that consistency with an auditing firm. Definitely, I would lean towards it's going to be a smoother transition for Peter and his administrative staff, because they've worked with them now for a year or two. They understand what they're looking for. I think it'll be easier, like you said, to provide the information. Those are just some of my thoughts.
All right, any other comments? Is there a motion?
Yes, Dan, I'll move that we follow staff's recommendation.
You want to go first or second?
I'll take a second.
All right. So we have a motion to follow staff's recommendation. So Julie,
Yes.
Dan, Dan, do you vote? How do you vote on that motion, Dan? Busy. I'll come back. Gary Godey,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Stan,
Yes,
Brent,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
John Ukestead,
Yes.
Bruce, Bruce, are you available?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. And then back to Dan.
Yeah, Dennis, I'm back. I got kicked out for some reason. Yes.
No problem. Thank you. All right, next issue up is next year's budget.
Hey, Dennis.
Yes.
This David Thompson. I've got a hard stop at 11, so I got to drop off. I got an event that I can't miss for work.
All right. Well, thank you for being here.
All right, thanks. Everybody have a good day.
All right, any comments on the draft budget for next year?
Angel, can you pull up the budget page or roll down some? There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
Brent, do you guys want it to see it?
Yeah,
large?
if you could blow it up, yeah, it just looks
Okay.
like it, yeah,
One more?
sure.
Good, and okay.
Yeah, I think the big news, at least from my looking at it, is that the assessment isn't changing. They're not recommending any change in the assessment amount.
And if we can whittle away at that administrative services contract, we'll be adding to our stabilization fund.
I think legal's our biggest issue. The administrative services aren't even the legal. I don't see 300,000 getting it, but
On the legal side.
yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever we whittle off administrative services will go straight to legal.
Yeah.
Are you looking for a budget?
But it's still open for comments.
Okay.
And then, yeah, if there's no further comments, is there a motion?
It's a little difficult for us to approve it when we don't know what we look like on our one cost. I mean, it's
Well,
an
well,
approximation.
Well, we're gonna be under it regardless, because both firms that were essentially eliminated, were under that amount.
Right.
But, so it's budgeted for either way.
Yeah, so it's provided for, and then, like you said, if something different happens, then that will just add to the reserves.
And it's under that number right until our out of scope work starts. My favorite phrase. But as it stands, I'd move to approve.
All right,
I'd second that.
all right, so we have a motion to recommend approval of the draft budget.
Real quick, Dennis, can I just step in real quick? So admin staff will only be presenting the budget at the October meeting, but it will be for approval at the December meeting.
Oh, so this is just for comment at this point?
Yes,
Then we don't need to vote.
We don't need to vote, but since we already have a motion and a second, I think that would be good for next month, so we don't have to do it next month, unless there's any changes.
Maybe we should wait and see if there's any changes. I retract my motion.
Okay. Well, I'll just say that the,
Brent? Are you retracting?
I retract my second.
Okay.
There may be some slight changes, but it's all based off the fees, the fee structure, so.
We'll take it up next month, I guess.
yeah, so the only comment we have, I don't think we really had any comments about the draft numbers, so I'll just say that.
Okay.
In our report. Thanks, Angel, I missed that.
of course.
All right. Next one is new production for East Side. I think this is an elementary school, is that correct?
My alma mater. Angel, can I ask you a question on this one?
Yeah, of course.
So they do owe $126,000. So that will be brought current before this is approved. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Eastside Union School District is not a party to the judgment. So they will have to successfully intervene. So this approval is contingent upon that they successfully intervene in the judgment and become a party. And they will also need to satisfy all replacement water obligations. You are correct. It is about $126,000. That's for the replacement water assessments and the admin fees, admin assessments. They owe 206.95 acre feet in water. And I do know they're working with an Exhibit 4 party now on possibly getting a transfer to satisfy those replacement water obligations. But yes, you are correct. The approval is contingent upon successfully intervening and satisfying those fees.
Thank you, Angel.
You're welcome.
So any comments on this?
I'll make a motion to approve it,
Subject
to what Angel just stated, yeah, okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to recommend approval of this new production application, subject to a couple of conditions. So Julie,
Yes.
Dave, Dan,
Yeah,
Gary Godey,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
David, I guess you left, Stan,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
John Ukestead,
Yes.
and Bruce.
Yes.
Thank you. And then this next item are just some recommended model protocols, which I don't think there's any action on. This are just for information at this point. Were there any comments from the committee that you'd like me to forward to the board?
I'm just curious if you, Dennis, and James, Kim, Brent, if you have some input on what is your feeling on this? I mean, this is much more in your line of work than especially me. Or what would your feelings be?
I'll start, Kim.
You asked me, Dennis?
Yes, yes.
Well, model's only as good as the data that's in there, right? I think we need a tool, and it's a good start. That's my input.
Any thoughts on the kind of the rules that they set up around how it would be used?
Yeah, I'm a little, I mean, it's good to have criteria. And so I don't have any specific comments to that.
All right. Brent?
Yeah, I think that, and who this may apply to, I think it's, I don't want to say sensitive data, because technically we're all paying for it. I think that the intended use for it, as long as it's used for the safeguard of the basin, and I don't know, I didn't read enough to see how it dictates who could get it. I don't think that this should be, I think you should be a member of the judgment in order to utilize any of this, so that you have some buy-in. I just don't want to publicly give this data out to any firms that are looking to solicit solicit or influence opinions one way or the other. I think as long as it's used for Watermaster plans, hydraulic modeling, for growth and development in the valley, in the right way, I would support it. And I think that maybe there should be a qualification aspect as to who the model is shared with. Do you have the staffing, the software, the capabilities, and the know-how to utilize the model in the first place? And I don't know what that criteria would be. Maybe Todd Groundwater and the Watermaster board and the administrator could come up with some type of criteria as to who gets it. If you're qualified to even utilize the data in the first place, just so that it stays in the right hands.
That sounds good, and they do have some rough criteria here for letting somebody use the model. So that's probably a good start.
Yep. And so if you go to page 97, please. Okay. Yeah, I think that is a good start. The 3 bullet points.
And it does seem to limit it to parties, so.
Yeah.
It's not open to the general public.
Right. And was this Todd Groundwater who came up with this? Todd did? Okay, I think that they put some thought into it then.
Dennis, and just to let you know, you previously said this is just for information, but I do think that the board is going to vote on these recommendations. So I don't know if you guys want to also have a vote.
No, I just noticed that I'm getting my items mixed up here. So yeah, this one is a recommendation or an action item. The last one was, or the budget was informational, so. James, any thoughts on this?
No, I want to see how this one plays itself out, and then do a little more research on myself before I have any more input than that.
All right, so is there a motion to make a recommendation to the board on this?
Dennis,
Yes,
are you willing to accept input from a non-select expert?
are you going to? Well,
I had some.
but you're an expert, John.
No, this is Stan.
It's Stan.
Oh, Stan, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did come away with some questions.
Sure.
The first one is who bears the cost if they use the model? There's no indication about what the costs are to do a model run. Is it a constant cost? Is it vary? But it would be helpful to have context on the cost. I'm seeing Maureen Riley's hand up. Maureen, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to jump in and speak on this, I would stand down until you're done.
I could also wait till you finish all your questions, but with the cost, it is variable. It depends on what kind of scenario you're running and what kind of local consideration you need to make for the model. Part of the reason why we have these criteria is that the model is a regional model, and it might not be able to answer all questions out of the box. And there might need to be grid refinement or some other additions to the model, and we want to be able to help be a part of that conversation. So how much needs to be updated or looking at a local grid, that would change the costs. We have some language here that if it's part of an application, that the applicant would bear the cost for a material injury analysis. And if it's being used by another consultant on behalf of a party, that party would bear the costs of the model. So in both cases, it would be passed on to the beneficial user of the model. But it is so hard to put a number on how much a model run would cost, even if it's how much we would do with Todd to work with the consultant to make sure the scenario's right to run, or just doing the model scenario ourselves. It is a big range. It would be time and material on Todd's side, so we would estimate it based on the scenario, if that answers. It's a vague answer to your specific question.
It actually was a vague question, Maureen, so that's appropriate. The second thing is we talk about having a baseline condition that we will compare the results to determine material injury. Is there any further definition about the baseline? Is there, just a couple sample questions. Is there going to be a standard baseline? So there's a baseline scenario out there and everyone compares to the same baseline? Or potentially does the baseline change for different applicants? And then how is it going to reflect the variability of the components of the hydrologic inventory?
When we call baseline, it's how the model is currently calibrated to run over the historic time frame. We'd have to come up with a future baseline, but that's usually, expected hydrology is repeated and everything is kept the same in the model. The geology, pumping, we could keep pumping the same. It just really means no project. So a future scenario would be run for the material injury, we'd add in additional pumping wells and compare that back to what would happen if we didn't have those wells. So there would be one baseline for all scenarios. We would have to, if we're looking at future projections for like an EIR, we'll have to come up with a future baseline for the basin. And I think that's included in our modeling budget. We have some annual budget for modeling to update it to the next water year, forecast out some things that might happen in the future. So there would be one baseline. I don't think we have a future scenario totally locked in, but it would be one thing for everyone to compare to. And the reason to compare it to a baseline is the model is a simplification of the geology. And so just looking at the delta between two helps understand what the emphasis of the project would be, the impact of that particular project, and not the noise that might be introduced from the simplification of the model. So it's just a way to even out the project related impacts to the basin.
Okay, thank you. Then also, I had made the comment earlier, I think on last month's meeting, about can we have any guidelines to decide when an injury rises to the level of being material? And I didn't see any discussion about those criteria. The closest I saw was that, quoting, the risk of material injury would still be determined according to the professional judgment of the Watermaster engineer. And that left me questions. Well, are there any defined criteria that the Watermaster uses to make those judgments? And if so, can those be defined for us?
This is a very important comment, and we heard your comment when we were developing this guidance. We worked with Craig and Cameron to really come up with a framework, and working through what determines material injury and having numbers and specific volumes proved problematic because it really depends on the situation, the location of the pumping, the susceptibility of subsidence. And so every time I would come up, I'm an engineer, I like to have the numbers and criteria. And every time I came up with specific numbers, Arden would find a way to describe how maybe that wouldn't be applicable in all situations. So it would be limiting to have a specific volume. We do have language in this framework that says we'd only look at applications, the larger applications, screening out those 1.5 acre feet applications. That's unlikely to cause cumulative material impact on the basin. But as far as each individual case, it still needs to be reviewed. It depends on the water levels, the trends of the area, the susceptibility of subsidence, local pumping nearby, the depth of the aquifer at that location. So there's a lot of variables at play that just don't boil down well to one set of criteria. So we hear that a criteria is needed, and we're still trying to come up with a way to be protective, but also give certainty, especially if applicants are applying and it's unclear if it's a material injury, that there's a lot of uncertainty. And we understand that there needs to be more certainty in the process, but also we want flexibility to make sure we're protecting the basin.
Okay.
So another vague answer.
That was, I think, a good answer. It is complicated. I think we need something. I don't think we have it here, but it is complicated, and I couldn't tell you what the something is. I just think we're missing something, and I don't have a simple solution to offer up to you. So I appreciate that you're seeing the issue. And
we see the issue, and we continue to discuss it on our side, working with the attorneys to find that middle ground between the two. So yes, we hear that, and we understand that a criteria would be helpful. And it might just be that we need to break down the criteria further to be sub-area dependent, or certain areas are more sensitive than others. So we're continuing to consider the need for criteria.
Yeah, and let me take a moment. Dennis, I have like 4 more questions. I've run through 3 so far. I'm wondering if this is helpful to this committee, or if you would prefer if I try and reach out to Maureen someplace else and not take up our committee time. So I'd like some guidance whether you think I should continue on this or.
Yeah, I think it's helpful for everybody to hear your questions, Stan.
Okay, I'll try and be brief, but I do have a few more. So Maureen, one of the things you mentioned were early on in this memorandum, it does talk about the model resolution being too coarse for most local studies, such as analysis simulating the cone of depression from a single well. But then later, there's language where it looked like the process where the Watermaster engineer, upon having an application, if the Watermaster engineer thinks they might need a model study, they document what might be needed and send that to the Watermaster board for its review. But those criteria, it looked like it could go down to, you might possibly try and run a model on a new production application for 1.5 acre feet. And then it also mentioned a permanent water transfer as small as 10 acre feet. And both of those numbers struck me as like way too small for this model to give you a meaningful answer on.
I'll give 2 answers to the one question. The reason why those application quantities are there is that is the rate structure of our applications. We have basically a small application and a larger application. So that's just the divide of application type. And we use that as a easy screening. If it's less than 1.5 feet, it definitely doesn't need a model. If it's greater than that, that whole application type can be reviewed quickly, but still reviewed, whereas the smaller applications don't even need to be reviewed. Yes, the model cells are big, and if needed, the area can be refined locally. There are I'm going to get a little nerdy on the model. There's a new version of ModFlow that has the ability to telescope down your grid, and we've updated the model to incorporate that capability. So somebody could come in and add additional tinier cells in a specific part of the model. So that could be a way to look at some of the smaller projects. And although that the model as it is now doesn't show cones of depression of individual wells, the volumes are still very much a part of the water balance that is simulated. And if it is a larger well, we'll see the impact of it, maybe not the detail of the water levels nearby, but the impact of the water budget is still able to be seen. So hopefully that answers your question, why we have those very small amounts. Like I said, we played around with criteria and we really couldn't agree with any other than that application type in general. There would be candidates within that.
Yeah, and again, understanding the complexity you're dealing with, but I'm thinking you would agree. I would hope that we never use that model for even a 10 acre foot. It just, and maybe the model could be refined, but I have trouble imagining there'd ever be enough model benefit to make that cost appropriate. But
yeah,
again,
and those
we'll
numbers,
see what the specifics are if it comes up, but that's what my gut tells me.
Yeah, and totally agreed. Those numbers are way too small, but it was a good breaking point of the applications to give some certainty in the application process. We were thinking that maybe in the future, different applications could have a different cost that has this model evaluation built in. So, and that's why we were thinking along the lines of application type as a method to screen out which ones need to be evaluated and which ones don't. But yeah, understood that those volumes were not set forth as a criteria of what should be a model scenario.
Yeah, so
and maybe we need language there to express that those are application types and not necessarily criteria.
Yeah, that would have been helpful because I got caught up. Why do some types of production have a 1.5 limit and another 10? It didn't quite make sense.
Yeah, I had gone through our application types and kind of looked at the number of applications we get for each one of those. We do get a lot of small applications that, again, don't need to be reviewed. And we get less of these larger types. But yeah, I think we needed language there to express that this is not the criteria we're recommending, but just an application type, a bucket that we'll start looking into.
Yeah, so I'm going to boil it down to one more question, which is a little bit related to another one. A prior comment I made was about issues or applications which are large, because I think when we get into large applications, that's where we're really going to have to look out for cumulative material injury.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to do it. I think it's going to be complicated to figure out how to do it, when to do it, how to model these other projects that may interact and help cause a cumulative material injury. And I just wanted to raise the issue again. I think it's complicated. I don't have a clear solution, but I think that's where the model's going to be most useful when we're dealing with big projects that have that potential. And I just didn't see any recognition of that in this memorandum.
I think we are considering larger projects that would have a cumulative and a collection of large projects that would have a cumulative impact to the basin. We just didn't call that out as a separate situation. I think I understand the need for that. I see the potential value. And I do understand that the guidance is kind of written as a application by application scenario, but you're right. There is the look at everything together. And then that brings up additional questions of who pays for that particular model scenario if you're looking at multiple different projects or applications.
That's really helpful, Maureen, because I was most concerned that we agreed that that's an issue of concern that's going to have to be addressed, rather than expecting you would be able to address that in a very fulsome way on the first draft of this memorandum. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, and that is helpful for us to think about the cumulative. We are considering it, but we are also trying to be mindful of who is responsible for not only designing the scenarios, but also paying for all the work to be done.
Yeah.
So that is a consideration that we'll take into account.
Yeah, so Dennis, shifting to you, I have these questions that I've written out. I'm wondering if I should provide you a written summary of those questions that could be included in our memorandum to the board, just so these questions are documented and that we have this discussion.
No, I appreciate that, Stan. Make sure miss something.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get that to you before the end of today. And thank you, Maureen, for your input in answering these questions. Very helpful.
Thank you for your thoughtful review of the guidance.
All right. Are there any other comments on this recommendation? Sounds like even if the board were to approve these, if they're going to continue to evolve. Is that a fair statement, Maureen?
I think this is a good first pass. And even with these guidances in place, each individual scenario might have additional discussion. You know, as we see larger projects, what we would like to simulate and who simulates it. I think there will be individual discussions when these projects arise. This is just meant to give some certainty on the process.
Thank you. If there's no other comments from the committee, is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve Todd Groundwater's recommendations for the process with this particular proposal.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion to recommend approval of this as a set of protocols to start with. So Julie,
Yes.
Dan Clifford,
Yes.
Gary Godey,
Yes.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Stan,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
John Ukestead,
Yes.
and Bruce.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. All right, and the next item is the Watermaster engineer's report, and then the biannual sub-area management report meeting. So Marie and Arden, you want to take it away on this?
Sure. I'm filling in for Arden today. She's on vacation in Italy. So you have me. I'm Maureen Riley, a principal engineer at Todd Groundwater. And I'm here. This is our chance. We appear before the advisory committee twice a year to talk through the production and transfers that have occurred on the sub-area basis, to keep you up to date on things that might be changing in the basin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm requesting to share my screen so I can just run through the slides here on my end, if that's possible. Okay, great. Okay. So can everyone see my slides?
No, bring your PowerPoint up.
Should. Okay, well, if this doesn't work, we can go back to it looks like I'm sharing.
Yeah, I'm seeing it here.
Okay, there is an opportunity to see a different.
Sorry, Marina, I made you a co-host. Do you want to see if maybe that makes a difference?
Okay, I'll stop sharing and resharing. There is an opportunity to see multiple screens at the top. So let me try that again.
I think Arden had the same issue at the board meeting trying to
share
a screen.
The new version of Zoom you can have multiple screens and you can toggle on the top. And so that might just be, oh, I see my screen. Does anyone else see my screen as an option?
No.
Okay, well, we can just go back. I will just let you know when I'm ready for the next slide. I'm going to stop sharing on my side and we'll just go with the packet.
Okay.
So we can move on to the next slide, which shows the table, the first table. Oh, well, what we're going to talk about is the production by sub-area that's in the annual report 2023, and then the transfers that have occurred since then. And you'll have to bear with me. There's lots of tables and lots of numbers, but hopefully we can go through it. Go ahead. So this is our first table that's right out of the annual report that shows the production rights and carryover water by sub-area. By first glance, you can tell Central has a lot of both the rights and the carryover water, which makes sense. In general, the production rights are more than half are in Central, and then 20% in West is the next version, the next biggest. There's a lot of carryover water in Central. Considering that they have the bulk of the rights, it also makes sense they have the bulk of the carryover. And it generally follows the percent of carryover is similar to the percent of production right, which is what we'd expect to see. And you can see with the next slide, the summary of rights by carryover. And these are this just shows a little bit more where the production rights are, how much of the new pumpers are in what sub area. As you'll see, a lot of the new production is occurring in the southeast sub area, as well as the west. And so we're keeping our eye on these applications as they come in and where they're happening to give an idea of the cumulative impact that Stan was talking about across the basin. A lot of the small pumpers also in the southeast. Still, as I mentioned in the previous slide, Central has the bulk of the rights and the bulk of the carryover water. Okay, and the next is a graph. We're finally moving out of the tables. And this just shows how the carryover water has increased each year. As production rights are not used, it goes into carryover water. And we're keeping an eye on this by sub area because this water might be able to be pumped out in the future given the right production rights and areas of production. And we want to make sure that we know where this is in case additional pumping happens in these sub areas. Different sub areas are susceptible to different things, and we just want to know where the potential liability is in the future. Like I mentioned, it's like the third time I'm mentioning it, Central has the bulk of the carryover, and so we're keeping an eye on that and on the possibility of that being pumped from the aquifer and what kind of material injury we might see from that. We're also seeing a growth in the investment where the water is purchased or transferred without a point of extraction. And so this is just water that is owned, but not necessarily tied to a location or a sub area, but can be brought back to the sub area through a new point of extraction. We can now move on to what's happened in 2024 so far. These are the one-time transfers. You can see that there is water moving to and from each sub area. Central had 27,600 acre feet from Central transferred out, but an additional 43 transferred in. This includes the big transfer that's from LA County Sanitation to Five Lions operation. And that was a fixed transfer over multiple years. It just looks like a big amount all at once. In general, sub-basins are remaining similar to what they were before, with again the no extraction point increasing as people are using that as an investment opportunity and not a location to produce that water. Looking at the one-time transfers in 2024, this is again looking where it's coming from and where it's going to. Central looks big because there's 10,000 acre feet coming into Central, but that was originally from Central into one of those investment, no extraction point category. So it's not necessarily a shift to Central, it's just reapportioning of some of the rights that were in Central. Other than that, it is fairly balanced here as well. The next slide shows the permanent transfers. And that has a much less than the one-time transfers. And you can see again, that is also fairly stable on sub-area to sub-area. It does show that 51 acre feet was bought as an investment in Central. And so we're looking at this investment, the no extraction, as well as the sub-area pumping to really give us an idea of not only what's happening now, but what could happen in the future as this water moves around. Yeah, the big change in here is the Willow Springs sub-area. But other than that, everything looks pretty stable. Okay, and then I saw you flash to the next slide. That's all I have. I know this has been a pretty long meeting, so I wanted to get through that pretty quickly, but I'm here for questions on the sub-area changes or anything you want to ask the master engineer while you have me.
Maureen, this is Stan again. So I had a couple questions. First one is, when we are referring to carryover, is this all the carryover? Is this both carryover based on production rights and carryover based on imported water return flows?
That's a good question. I think it does. I think it does include both, but I will confirm with Arden. I think that question has come up before and she did answer that they're both. So I'm 99% sure they're both, but I will confirm.
Okay. And the second question is very general. I'll let you finish writing.
I'll make sure to report back. And okay, yes.
There's one of the graphs just showed carryover by sub-area building over time. Mm-hmm. And it caught my eye because earlier this year, Watermaster Council distributed some really general proposals dealing with carryover and rolling those into storage agreements. And my recollection was those proposals were somewhat hostile to getting all of carryover rolled over into storage agreements. And I don't recall if I specifically asked the question at the time, but one of the questions I had on that, is there any technical analysis? What's the basis for that concern? Is it material injury when you try and pump it out, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's material injury when you try to pump it out. We like to look at the change in storage as the health of the basin, and being protective of the basin, we want to see more increase in storage, and the carryover water can be potentially removed from that storage. How it's removed will be determined through the application process and the material injury. And so there will be an opportunity when that water, when the party wants to use that water, there will be a new point of extraction or new production right application where we will be able to look at the material injury. So there is a process for that. But in general, just knowing that kind of water, those volumes of water is out there as a liability to the storage is the general concern. So there's a general concern of just the volume, and then the specific concern of the material injury when it's extracted from the aquifer.
So one follow-up comment on that, and maybe it would be a presentation comment too. one of the things that isn't shown here is the amount of stored water within each sub-area.
That is true. So this
Okay.
doesn't give the context of those numbers.
All the concerns that you've mentioned here with carryover apply equally to stored water. It's a benefit to the basin while it's in. It's a potential risk trying to take it out. And it's basically a local risk, right? It's not a risk to the basin because the basin stays in balance. But it is a risk if you're next door to someone that's turned on 10 wells, in a dry sequence of years. But I just want to make sure that the way carryover is treated and the concerns with carryover on storage should be related to, I think, basically treated the same as other stored water. And
That is a good point.
Without the context, because I think there's roughly 200,000 acre feet of stored water in the basin now. So
Yeah.
at this point, it's about the same as carryover.
There is a different element of timing where production rights are by year, where carryover, you could have multiple years production rights extracted the same year. But that again would be covered in the application process.
If you have 200,000 acre feet under imported water storage agreements and 200,000 acre feet of carryover, the risk is kind of the same because neither one of them do you really, well, let me try to put it better. For either case, if that water is recovered over too short a time in too concentrated an area, it's going to cause a problem. But the problem is the same for carryover storage agreements as it would be for imported water storage agreements, at least in my view.
Yeah, there would have to be protections in place to make sure that the material injury is reviewed when that water is ready for extraction. So I think that those guardrails are in place. And I think you have a valid point that stored water is stored water, whether it's stored as carryover or in the ground. So that is something to consider.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. Nice presentation.
Are there any other comments or questions? Hey, that's all I have. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Maureen. So that should be the board meeting. Then outstanding items that we have is to recommend that the board consider putting some administrative cost in place if they're going to go through a process of giving, I guess, maybe any kind of variance on invoices. So I'll put that in the report also. We still don't have any small pumper representation on this committee, so again, if there's anybody out there who knows somebody who's in that class, who would take the time to be part of these meetings, that'd be great. Anything else that you want to talk about next month?
Dennis, this is John Eucasted.
Yes.
I noticed that for the last couple of years that you've been on your roll call, you've been asking for Richard Wood. He's available.
Yeah, he still participates occasionally, even though he's not formally part of that class anymore.
Well, he hasn't been a small pumper for a couple of years.
Right.
And I just wanted to bring it to your attention because I noticed at a roll call, he always calls his name, but he hasn't been he's in a mutual water company. He hasn't been a small pumper for at least 2 years, maybe 3.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. It's just, he's got the background to make comments on anything on that until we find a replacement. That's the only reason I call on him.
So that's your choice, right?
As long as you let me make a choice, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Just want to clarify that, that's all.
All right, thank you,
And
John.
another thing, I'd like to ask Stan a question, if it's all right.
Sure.
Are you on Exhibit 8, Stan?
Exhibit 8, is that the imported water return flows?
Right.
No, we're not.
Okay, thank you, Stan.
Sure thing.
All right, any outstanding issues you want to discuss next month, other than next month's agenda for the board meeting? I'll consider that a no.
Are we gonna base next month's meeting on whenever the Watermaster sets their meeting, or are we a hard, fast November 20th?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, Angel, if we would have a meeting on the 20th, regardless of when the board meeting ends up, or if we should try to have that a week before the board meeting.
That's a good question. So I put out some preliminary dates to the board members, just to kind of get an idea of their availability. I do know Aqua's the first week, I believe, of December, so it was a little problematic coming up with dates. We're looking at the second week of December, I think. Yeah, the second week of December. So the 3 preliminary dates that I put out are all in the second week of December. I don't see a problem with you keeping your meeting date. If you want to push it forward or further out a little bit, that would be fine too. We would just have to have all of our agenda items like we normally do to create the packet for you. So you tell us what you need and we'll figure it out.
I guess that's the question, is if you could have the agenda items that early, like actually the week before the 20th, or not.
Let me look real quick.
We're talking about the second week of December. Do you want to try for the first week?
You want to do it before the 20th, Dennis?
Well, no, if we typically need something to work off about a week before the meeting.
Right. So it would just be on schedule as usual if you went with the 20th. So I'm sure staff can figure out how to get all the items together.
Yeah, either that, or I think if we move it to the next week, that's the day before Thanksgiving, we might not have good participation.
Yeah.
And then if we move it to the week of Aqua, there's a couple of us who might not be able to make it, but most of the committee could. But I won't be here.
You want to leave it the
Well,
20th?
staff is okay with the 20th. I'm speaking for all staff right now, but I don't see why not. So.
All right, we'll shoot for the 20th at this point.
Okay. If
All right.
staff says otherwise, other staff members, I will reach out to you and let you know, but let's just go with the 20th.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for all your time this morning and input. So I'll try and get this somehow put together and submitted.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
I'll have some to you before the end of the day.
Thanks, Stan.